Hello and welcome to episode 120 of the Coach's Journey podcast. I'm your host today, Joey, and I have had a wonderful experience interviewing Mel Sims. When Mel discovered coaching, she was adamant that nobody can understand her life. Her journey into coaching allowed her to really put down the mask, harness her strengths, and re-emerge into the world as a neurodivergent emotional coach. Mel trained as a coach while learning about herself through the lens of an ADHD diagnosis. And as well as offering her a pathway of personal growth, these experiences really helped Mel find her niche through the realisation that people who are neurodivergent need a particular coaching approach. In this episode of the Coach's Journey podcast, Mel speaks to me about the different styles of emotional communication and the many ways in which people can really be misunderstood. She talks about how being an unpolished coach enables her to offer a space where people can let go of their need to hide their feelings and really be guided by authentic intuition. Mel offers several brilliant metaphors and visualization techniques that really illuminate this episode, such as the idea of wearing a colander on your head as a way to filter out information, and also thinking of neurodivergent minds as these stars, which have now become more visible in our world of modern telescopes and greater understanding. The challenges of time management we discuss, rest and staying grounded are also explored. In this episode, Mel describes how she tailors coaching to people who might need alternative approaches to scheduling, flexibility, communication and depth. We also talk about the intuitive, bordering on almost a magical connection that neurodivergent people share, having navigated shared challenges. How to make space for emotional outpourings that can have a transformative impact in a coaching session. A psychological technique that enables a kinder, more compassionate approach to self-coaching. And also how to own your weak spots and really set healthy expectations. She also explains why she starts some of her coaching talks, of which I have witness, she wears a snorkel, a diving mask and a set of flippers, which is an interesting start. And actually, it reminds me really that Mel is probably the most real, authentic person I have certainly interviewed, in fact, maybe even spent any time with in a room. She's quite extraordinary, and I really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did making it. Mel Sims, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're most welcome. And I wasn't sure, or we were discussing before we came on, whether we should talk about the fact that we've actually just hugged in person, which I think is a coach's journey first. And that is because a client that I've had last year has gone through the diagnosis process for ADHD, and I was looking for coaches who specialise in neurodivergent tendencies or ADHD. And lo and behold, there's a coach that lives 2 doors down from where I live. He didn't know. Who has a thriving practice, as you do, Mel, and we'll dig into that. So here we are on Zoom, but only a few walls apart from each other. Welcome.
Sharing the same glass bottle recycling van as we speak. I think it's just left.
Yeah, we had to wait for that to finish. I think they're further up the road now. Oh, so you may well know, and any regular listeners will know, we always begin our long form, lovely, delicious conversations with, how did you hear, Mel, about this thing we call coaching?
Well, I think incorrectly, I thought coaching was only used for sort of sports personalities to encourage people to perform better. And little did I know that actually it could be used to help you think better about life and yourself. And so about 4 years ago, I was reading something and think it was in a newspaper, they'd got a coach to comment on something. And I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. And I also noticed there seemed to be more and more people coming through as life coaches. And there was a little prickly part in me that I'm sure we'll come to that thought, how can someone help somebody with their life when they don't know anything about it? And the more and more I read about it, I got the bug and thought, that's something that I think I would like to do. So about 4 years ago.
Mm. And that's really interesting that you've already come to prickly around the word life coaching, because I think as coaches, we come across that a lot, or we feel it a lot. And it's definitely come up in a number of episodes on the Coach's Journey podcast. So say more about that word, that term, life coach.
I was adamant that nobody would understand my life, and how would I be able to benefit from going and seeing somebody when I had been masking as a neurodivergent, which we'll come to, for 48 years. So they needed to hack past the whole mask to actually get me to be vulnerable. And what I have now learned is that actually it's about holding the space and challenging that person and not fixing that person, but encouraging them to fix and work on themselves. And so by plonking the word life at the beginning, I think it might put people off who think, well, you're not going to know what my life is like. How is it going to work? So sometimes when we start working with a client, we've already had to fight through the marketing of letting people realize we're not trying to be a guru on their lives.
Yeah.
I think from, sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
No, you go.
I think from I think in terms to become a coach, unless you are a sports coach or a transitional employment coach, things like that, there is almost perhaps a wishy-washiness, dare I say it, in the way that people perceive life coaches. And I've always had careers that are very sort of specific and everybody knew what I did.
Yeah.
And so there was quite a fight with my own pride, really, taking on a role that had such a wishy-washy title. Dare I say it? Do you think that?
Yes, I'm glad you dared say it, although all of my roles have not been specific. I'm sure we'll get into your history. So I didn't quite have that path, but I love it that you have just articulated it in that way. And I'm wondering if over the last, 4 years for you, 4 years, even, I mean, especially since COVID, there's been an explosion in the understanding and depth of the coaching industry in the UK. So I wonder if you feel it's transformed at all, and if you would have the same response if you read that article in the paper now in January 2026.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I would feel quite as prickly. And I think certainly since COVID, people have embraced their mental health and wanted to talk more. And so it's easier. However, I also think a lot of people have done more work on themselves since COVID. They've probably read more, they've had deeper conversations at the bottom of the drive with their mask on, etc., which also might bring up a situation where people think there's no room for a life coach either. What do I need one for? So the hook for me was to very much position myself into the niche, being a neurodivergent emotional coach, where I think I'm not claiming that I can sort all areas of their life out, which I think the very word life coach seems to sort of make people think. I can't help you do your washing, you're washing quicker. I can't make your house more tidy. I can't. But I do think that people are now dropping into conversations more often. Oh, I see a coach or I see somebody, and I'll take that. If you want to call me somebody, that's fine, rather than a life coach.
Well, I saw that you've actually changed your. So I'd love to get into the question in a moment about where your practice is now. But as I've been looking into you, Mel, and learning about your work, I noticed you've gone from the term ADHD coach into emotional coach. I noticed you said on a YouTube video. And where are you at with that now?
Well, I feel far more comfortable being known as a neurodivergent emotional coach. And shall I explain a little bit why I made that shift?
Yes, please do. I think that would be helpful.
So around the same time as when the word coaching sort of came on my radar about 4 years ago, I had been running a business which had to close during COVID. It was the hospitality industry. I set up an under fives beautiful wooden play barn in Essex. So although we're neighbours, I grew up here, but I'd gone away and had my life, etc. And I was reading an article and it sounded exactly like me. And I realized that I had ADHD. So I went and I got diagnosed. And my coaching training was happening at the same time as me learning all about myself with ADHD. But what I started to notice was that whether people had been diagnosed or not, they were suffering from the same things, the same emotions that I'd gone through.
Yeah.
And so I wanted it to be more open, because by pigeonholing myself and calling myself an ADHD coach, if you didn't have the stamp, because we go through huge imposter syndrome with ADHD anyway, I thought people might be frightened that they weren't legit enough to come to me. Then, of course, what's also come out over time is that a lot of people who are ADHD are also autistic. There's probably a 70% crossover. There's OCD in the mix. There's Tourette's in the mix. There's dyslexia in the mix. And so I wanted to open it up to people who were curious, but who hadn't yet decided what box they fitted into. And by holding that curious space, lots of different people started to come and see me. And through that, I learned that not only was I ADHD, I was also autistic as well. So emotions have always interested me. I've had big emotions all my life. You know, you're too sensitive, you're too reactive, you're too intense, etc., etc. And one of the things that I notice is, put any neurodivergent in front of me, we're all completely different. But the one thing that we all have in common is we have the same harmful coping strategies that we've put in place to get on in the world. And that's what I coach. So neurodivergent emotional coach is better for me. Plus, again, there's a bit of prickliness around the word ADHD coach as well. Because whilst you might have ADHD, it doesn't mean you've got the skills to be a coach. And there is a glut of people, thank goodness, who are being diagnosed, but thinking, oh, this is a business I want to get into because I'm passionate, hyper-focused, a puppy dog. But I wanted to have a softer, more gentle, all-encompassing approach.
Oh, I like that. It seems a lot more sure and steady.
I think
Way
so.
to do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, there's so many places we could go. You've just said such a volume of things. I think actually, though, near the beginning of the conversation, it would still be really nice now. I've written down a few things so we can jump back in. But what does your practice look like now, from 4 years ago of reading the newspaper article to going through that process you've just described, personally and professionally? What does your practice look like today, day to day?
There's lots more men.
Uh-huh.
There's lots more adults. Because I think very often a teenager or a young person would have been pushed my way because it was sort of the clash at school, problems in the classroom, problems with behaviour. And through educating the parents then notice, because it's genetic, crikey, that really reminds me of me. And I think quite often, as we said at the start of the journey, coaching perhaps wasn't a norm for people. that as a result, their mum has come to see me, or their dad has come to see me, or someone who's read something in the newspaper has come to see me. And so there's a lot more undiagnosed people that will come and see me who've just got a hunch and feel that they're stuck in a rut, rather than the clean cut, I was diagnosed last year, I've now gone and looked for a coach. So there's a lot more conversations about teasing out why they feel that way in my practice now, rather than people feeling they had to be legitimately allowed to come to my practice. So it's sort of become bigger, more forgiving, more curious a space where people come and leave just having felt heard, I think. Whereas perhaps at the beginning it was a little bit more fact-finding.
Okay, so you mean when you were fact-finding, you had more of a framework in your coaching sessions? Or do you mean that you were drawing out from them more facts and figures so they would get a diagnosis, or
That.
The second?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That.
Whereas now it's a space where you hold a space.
Yes.
In very much an ICF model.
Yes.
For them to feel heard, for our clients to really feel like they can begin to reveal themselves and work out the best thing for them to do in their, dare I use the word, life, their lives.
Yes, it's exactly that. And I think social media has played a big part, because people have watched TikTok videos on ADHD or autism, or ADHD mainly at the beginning, as I said, because it wasn't until my journey went on that I realized the breadth of how it also might bring in other types of neurodivergence. And I think we, rather than fact find where the client arrives and says, I leave all my cupboard doors open like a TikTok video, or I leave the bath running and it overflows like a TikTok video. It's just more about the emotions that come with it, rather than them having to prove to me that they are ADHD coach worthy, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And I don't need them to prove anything to me, because actually we've all gone through our lives feeling not legitimate about ourselves. They leave my practice, my sessions are an hour and 15, feeling that it's okay they feel that way, whether they're diagnosed or not. That's made the difference.
And that transformation in them, I think I know, actually, because you are local and I have obviously been doing my research a little, means that you really do well on referrals.
Really well on referrals. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I mean, parents whose children, so I do sort of a 6-week blocking. And because we're neurodivergent, often we can't keep to the same time because we don't like structure. Often we have to keep to the same time because we're absolute routineaholics. So I have to be quite flexible with all of that. And it's really interesting. I mean, say a client has got an appointment, I don't know, Monday at 12 o'clock, and something's come up and they never did phone the plumber the week before, and finally the pipe has burst and they can't come to the session. Watching how much discomfort at the beginning of our sessions they go through to cancel or rearrange. Lots of little white lies come in because we've masked all our lives. Oh, I've really got to go and speak to the doctor. I've got an emergency appointment. And by the second appointment, they start to say things like, I didn't call the plumber and that's why the pipe burst. And I say, that's okay. I do things like that all the time.
Okay, this is brilliant. This is brilliant stuff, I think, for coaches to really understand, because that layering of what you've called white lies.
The white lies.
As coaches, you can sometimes sense something but can't quite put your finger on it. And the fact that you are so inside of that life experience,
yes,
and so well researched in yourself, and therefore getting right, digging in those sessions where you are really hearing people having similar experiences to you, you really know it's like this really multi-layered depth right up to the shallows of what's really happening here. So, oh my goodness, I've got too many questions in my head, because the first one I want to know is, at what stage do you know, where's the line as a coach with your coachee? How do you know that you are not projecting your own experience onto theirs? What do you do to be aware of that?
So the discovery call, which is a phrase I hadn't even heard of until my training, it sounded rather poncy-ponce. The discovery call is always done by video, because I am watching every single movement that you are doing. I am watching. That's going to make you really paranoid now. I don't mean it like that. But, I can see when you might look away, which tells me something. I can see when somebody has zoned out, which tells me something. I can see when somebody is finding it hard to answer the question that I've asked, because I can see there's a really bright light on, or there's the noise of the fridge, because I hear and see everything. And so it's very quick for me to notice when somebody is masking.
Well, I think my question, though, is, how do you know that you are noticing that, in truth, that is absolutely the case? Because it's your own experience. It's something that I wrangle with as a coach sometimes. Am I making too many assumptions here? Am I projecting my own life experience?
No, I think that there is a huge intuition at play all the time. And I wrote something down yesterday, actually, in that the reason why we as late diagnosed neurodivergents notice everything is because we've had to notice everything to keep safe. Because mistakes were dangerous. Mistakes meant you weren't invited to kids' parties. Mistakes meant that the teacher might, highlight something you're doing. And so the way that we kept safe was by noticing everything about everyone. And that skill, it's so bizarre that I now make money from that skill. So bizarre. Let's just sit with that a minute. Is something that's allowed me to be really successful and to make people feel at ease and comfortable from the moment that we speak. Yesterday, a young 18-year-old lad at university, discovery call. He was nervous. His mum had organised it. Let's get you a coach, right? And so we hit open and he smiled and the energy was already there. And I just said, you're like me. And he said, what do you mean? And we started talking. And within 5 minutes, he said, gosh, your energy is the same as my energy. And I said, there's this intuition between us where we already know we've probably had a hard time with this. So there's this beautiful non-judgment that comes out immediately when we start a phone call. And that's, as I say, intuition. That's a desire to make them feel comfortable so the real work gets done. And it's just an energy that I notice.
I have to be honest, I got distracted there when you put your hand up. Zoom, to do the lovely hand
did it do the wave?
Zoom's told me you've put your hand up, which threw me. That energy, that connection. Okay, we're on a podcast, which is public, so I also need to be aware of that. But there is something about that depth of connection that I think definitely in the coaching world, and me as a coach, listeners as coaches, have some kind of what you're calling intuition and opening. Sometimes I feel it is if my whole rib cage has just opened up like a set of wings, and there is my my beating heart just ready to receive you. And you talked about emotions earlier. It can be overwhelming, that sensation, but it invites such deep, well, what should I say, depth of connection so quickly.
Yes.
And when you then come across someone else of cut from a similar cloth or of a similar ilk.
Yeah.
There is this tangible, I don't know what to say. It's like static. There's something that enables us to have an understanding. And when I ask you about whether we're projecting our own experience onto others, you're right. You've enabled me by talking that through. We're not projecting in those moments. There's a complete inner knowing, the depth of knowing, our whatever it is, our wisdom or our Buddha nature, or just
Mm.
knows. That connection is very real and very deep, and it doesn't need any vocabulary.
No. And I think when you've done the work on yourself as well, and listen, every day I'm doing the work, it's not done. But when you've done the work on yourself, there's no fight in the need for them to think that you know your stuff or you're really clever or any of that business, which in the corporate world, you used to have to do all the time, right? Because you were being measured all the time. There's no measuring coming in. So say, for example, I've recommended somebody read something or watches something. They'll very often declare, oh, typically for me, I didn't read that book. They'll put themselves down early on in the chat, and I'll say, that's okay. You know where it is. And it's sort of a freedom being offered in that you can do what you want to do. This is your work to do. It's there. You've got the tools. But there are times when people have really clicked on something I've said and they just start crying. And it makes me cry. And there are times when we're both sat there just crying. And the first thing they say is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry, because they're so measured when they arrive about what effect they're having on everyone. And I say, that's okay, I cry all the time. And that feeling you talk about, when you really, really feel heard and safe, stirs something in me. Almost like watching, I love Hans Zimmer. So I went and watched him play end of last year, and I cried from the moment it opened till the end. 2 hours of it. My boyfriend kept passing me tissues all the time. And when you've got a really beautiful coaching session going on, it's that raw feeling where you're not projecting, but you're thinking, yeah, I've been there with you. I know this, and I can hold this space for you.
Yeah.
Love that. Love those sessions where you don't even talk much. You just help guide, and it just is enormous for them.
I like this pause because it's giving me, and I hope therefore listeners, a moment to really digest that sensation as a coach that we can have, and to remember how valuable that can be. I mean, we've all had it as coachees and as coaches. I think when we do this podcast, we always interview the person who's coming on, the guest, the lovely guest, Mel, you, for a few things that people might like you to talk about who know you. And when you were speaking just now, one of the things popped into my head, and I've got it written, so I'm going to get the words correct. You asked me to explore with you, how has coaching helped you become more authentic? And I think you've begun to really dig into that already. So maybe let's double click on that. And what I'm really interested in is, as you asked me to ask you, how has coaching helped you become more authentic? And also, I'd like to know how that authenticity, which I have really felt in you, looking at your videos, and we'll put links to everything in the show notes, your videos, your website, the things that you've written. I've personally been now to one of your in-person talks. Your authenticity, which I know can be an overused, another one of those prickly words, as you talked about life coach, but yours is raw and real and unpolished, and just, you are what you say on the, what it says on the tin. I'd love to know how that then in turn, in a lovely cyclical way, serves your practice and your coachees and helps you thrive as a person and your coaching practice thrive?
I realised that I don't have to be polished in coaching. I come unpolished, and that's what people are paying me for, to offer an unpolished space. I love that word. I might cry in this bit. I always felt unpolished. I always felt that I wasn't quite there. I had great careers. People were always saying how amazing I was, but they didn't know at the weekend I was a completely different person. I was unpolished on the weekend and I was so tired. And if I didn't share that with anybody, then the clients that come to me probably hadn't shared it with anybody either. And so the journey I've been on as a coach has allowed me to start to realize there are lots of people like me, which has allowed me to realize that I'm okay how I am. And any time where I would have masked or hidden or polished it up, I don't. If I don't say a word right when I'm coaching, I might repeat the word a few times until I get the word right, unequivocally authentic, present, true to the fact that I make mistakes. And I don't try and hide them. I don't try and disguise them. And that authenticity is probably the biggest thing for me, is that it's reinforced that it gets so much out of the client and allows them to do so much work that now why would I go back to being polished? It's ridiculous. And interestingly, and this is probably why I ended up coaching, is I noticed that in all my corporate roles, people would come to me and say, "Can I just run something by you?" And it wasn't corporate stuff. It was housey stuff. It was romantic stuff. It was life stuff. And so actually, by me being present with my flaws, warts and all, and warts are beautiful things, right? If you come from the island of warts, that it allows, it allows them to feel so unjudged when I'm sat there with unmatching socks,
Yeah.
or the cat's driving me mad and wants to be let out. I'm saying, "Excuse me," and they see my bum when I lean over and open the door. I think that unpolishedness has allowed my business to be so successful. And then at the end of every session, I've learned so much about myself vicariously through that client.
Yes.
God, have I learned a lot. I notice a prickle. I notice something I haven't quite grown in an area enough with. And I will journal and I will write it down. And I remember when I did coaching training 3 years ago and they said, "Oh, write anything down that comes up." And I thought, "What do I have to do this for? This is their stuff. This is their stuff." Good Lord, do you learn a lot about yourself through coaching. You learn if you want to try and fix things, something I've spent my entire life doing, because by fixing other people, it meant people wouldn't look at me through a microscope and see the real me.
Oh, can we pause on
That's
that?
a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think that's a big one for new coaches as well. And we have a lot of new coaches who listen. So say more about that, Mel.
Well, I think if you think to yourself, I think when you start as coaching, your mind is wandering all the time, thinking, "Oh, that happened to me in 1984. I know a really good solution for that. Let me share what happened to me."
Mm.
It's not necessary unless you're actually, in my style of coaching, showing a vulnerability that went on. It's not so much about the solution that happened. That's kind of irrelevant because they're going to find another solution. But it's sort of saying, "God, I remember that. I remember that feeling. I remember avoiding situations for that feeling." And for the client to think, you the coach, you went through those feelings as well, and stopping yourself, telling them how you fixed it, because it might sway them in how they then talk to you about what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bias, isn't there, when you try and prove, listen to how good a coach I am, listen to how I had a situation like that. That's not what they're there for.
Okay, something has come to mind that you spoke about before we started recording, and that was that you watched one of the Coach's Journey group coaching calls, and you heard yours truly
Being very vulnerable.
Well, I haven't watched it recently. This was 2 years ago. And anyone who regularly listens to the podcast may know that I've been going through a huge transition in the last 3 years. And there is an element, definitely, especially at the beginning, that I wanted to prove that I went through this because I'd changed so much. And that's not true. And also, if people knew what I was going through, they wouldn't want to come and coach with me. So what was it that you said about that before we came on air? Because I think it would be really useful for listeners. And what sparked for you from that conversation that helps you then as a coach and realize that authenticity that you were speaking of earlier on?
We live in a town that's quite small. And, lots of people know one another and talk to one another, et cetera, et cetera. And what you talked about was, if people knew about my life, about what was going on, might they have made an assumption about me when I came to coaching that I had too much going on and I wasn't able to be with them and be present with them. And you offered it into the coaching session that you did, that I watched. And a gentleman said, but by the very nature that you gone through so much of this stuff, it made you an absolute winner choice for people to come to you because you knew what they were feeling. You could go on that journey with them. And I think that's really, really important. And certainly for me, I had had quite a lot of counselling in my life. I think I'd had 6 counsellors throughout my life. And I'd go to them just thinking, undiagnosed, never knew anything about ADHD. Why do I always get stuck in this bit? Why do I always get stuck in this bit? And they never worked out for me because I don't think they'd had that lived in experience of my situation being really, really tough. And so it's really important that we are kind to ourselves and realize that when we've got stuff going on, we can sort of park it and be present and be professional. But there might be times that we might want to bring some of that in ourselves. I've gone through a situation last week, actually, which is quite interesting. So I wake up every morning happy, grateful about life. I've really worked on myself in that way. And I went through some anxiety last week, something that's not been on my radar for certainly since I've been diagnosed. And it was a situation where I was in a WhatsApp group with lots and lots of parents. And I said something quite direct. Yeah, we love those. I'm only in one. And I said something quite direct and it ruffled some feathers. Because I am direct. I'm not very good at small talk or faffing about. And it ruffled some feathers, yes. And I noticed that seeing the replies coming in was making something rise in me. Oh, this is really interesting. And I was reading a book on anxiety. I love reading. And it talked about whether our anxiety system had been updated since when it first caused us real problems. So I was very, very bullied at school. And for me, I noticed by being able to sort of put my coaching head on and self-coach, which is just brilliant, where you go, let me work out what's going on here. I love those. That I had zoomed back with all these WhatsApp messages to feeling 14 under attack, under a pack of different people, unsafe. And I had to say to myself, they're not going to trip you up. They're not going to poke you. They're not going to mock you. They're not going to put poo in your bag. All those things went on. And what was really lovely was there's been a couple of instances where we've talked about anxiety, and by me showing that I still have to work on stuff, the client spoke even more about that situation. Whereas if I'd never ever felt that feeling, I think we'd have had a pretty one-dimensional chat.
And from a coaching perspective, you talked about self-coaching there.
Yeah, love
So
it.
you went into, I heard you go into observer mind almost. That's what you're doing. So I've got 2 questions on that. There's so much depth in what you say. There's so many things. I don't know if this is maybe my own ADHD traits, perhaps. You never know. But there's too many things sparking off in my mind. I'm just going to choose one. No, I'm going to choose 2. So first of all, that observer mind, that ability to coach yourself, is that something that you have practiced? And do you think that the neurodivergent, because you've talked about autism and ADHD, and you say yourself in your talk and in many of the stuff I've read about you, ADHD is your diagnosis. So is there something that you could perhaps help us as coaches listening, how we can put that in, well, actually anyone listening, coaches too, how we can put that into practice? How do you do that regularly and consistently and manage to really be your own coach and take care of yourself in that way? Because me, myself, if we're talking about being authentic and vulnerable, I can end up spiraling into what you were speaking of earlier, that huge emotional experience, for want of a much better word, that doesn't even touch on it. And it takes a lot of energy to come back from that, to notice it, to observe it, to recognize what's happening, and to just allow it to pass.
Love it.
How do you do this regularly and consistently? How can you support listeners to really find a way that works for them?
I think a little bit like when you start working with a client, I set the room. I give myself some conditions. I put a contract into place, which is you're going to think about this from an observant point of view without you becoming emotional whilst thinking about it. And I imagine myself, I visualize myself all the time with a colander on my head so that only helpful stuff is allowed to come through the hole. And all of the sort of saboteurs and the old feelings about yourself and the not updated stuff stays out.
Bounces off.
It's called the colander. It's like a colander thing. And when I coach clients, sometimes when they arrive, I sit with a colander on. You know, when you came to my talk, what was I wearing?
A snorkel mask, a snorkel, and a set of flippers on stage. You looked fabulous, darling. And I've also seen you on various YouTube videos with lovely apparatus, either on your head or in front of you or around you.
Yeah,
you have a fantastic use of props. We shall put links to these.
Yes, and I'm going to bring in props in a minute. I work with lots and lots of props. So the colander effect. So I might think to myself, okay, what's going on here? And I might allow myself to feel how I felt at the age of 14 for 1 or 2 seconds, no longer, because there's no point in feeling that.
Okay.
But I will feel it and then say, okay, let's go back, look at kind of like the theory of it, look at what I've learned, and make sure that when I self-coach, I don't allow myself to go back over all those feelings again, but just to sort of hold the nib of it to really sort of explore it. And then once I've joined the dots up, it starts to be a tool I put in my backpack, which is, okay, if ever there's a feeling of anxiety, I will say, thank you very much, anxiety. You really looked after me years ago, but I've got this now. I've grown. I'm an adult. I've got much better tools. I pull out the tool out of my backpack, and the link is, you're safe now, Mel. don't go back to feeling 14. And I've got heaps of those going on. Heaps of those. I've got another one. When somebody gives you a bit of a funny, judgy look, very quickly, it even happens on autopilot now. I go in my toolbox. I don't go into the whole, what have I done? Don't they like me? Da, 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 da. Have I said something unpolished? Da, da. I go in my toolbox and I pull out. That's interesting, that look. I wonder what's going on in their life. Bang. It's just changed everything.
And this ability to do it, from what I'm hearing from you, is because of regular, consistent practice. Right? Yeah. I mean, Robbie Swale, he talks a lot about regular, consistent practice. He's got the 12-minute. Oh, in fact, I think you have one. The 12-minute method books.
I do.
And what I find is, for me, it takes a lot of discipline, diligence, determination to keep up a practice for a long time. And I mean, there's loads of things people can go and look at, obviously, about habits and how we form them and how we make them automatic, as you've just described. And you have done it. And I'm wondering if there's anything in your, I'm not even sure of the correct terminology, so Mel, pick me up on this if I've got it wrong, but your neurodivergent brain that has helped you do that. I wonder if the OR part, the autistic, whether that has helped you, because also I hear how good you are reading and how much you love reading. And I know you cite books left, right and centre all the time.
I do love reading.
And I've been in your house and you have many, many books like I do. But I believe you have read most of them, whereas I have read... I dip into books all the time. I might open 5 books a day, honestly, but I might read 3 minutes of each one, if that. There's something different about the way you're operating. How does that serve you in this practice and in your coaching practice?
Well, let's look at it from a reading point of view, is that I don't have a very good memory. I mean, as part of my ADHD, my executive functioning, which is the bit that's limited at times, affected, means that whilst I might read a fact and spout it to everyone on an evening, and Olivia, my daughter, says, "Oh, fact for the day," I've forgotten it by the next day, right? And I used to, there was a time when I didn't read for a couple of years because I beat myself up that I couldn't retain this information. Now, if I retain it or don't retain it, it's okay. And because I think a lot of people don't read because they think, I reread a sentence 8 times, or I can only do 2 pages at a time, or there's all these rules about whether it's worthwhile to do. I just see it as a bath. It's an experience. Whatever I'm reading, it's going in, whether I can pull on it or not. And so for me, at the end of every evening, this is something I do in bed every evening. I lie there and I think, is there anything sticking? Love that word. Anything sticking. And I find something. What's that feeling in my tummy? Ooh, let's work that out. What's that feeling here? Let's work it out. And very quickly, through self-awareness, I can say, ooh, there's a conversation you need to have. Get the colander out so that you don't have, they're not going to be happy with that. You're never going to speak to them again because they're not going to invite you. Put the colander on. And
for people listening, all of that stuff you just said, the colander was being held off your head.
Off
the
your head,
imaginary colander.
off your head,
all those negative thoughts coming.
All of that. And, I really wanted Janet to be my friend. I've gone and blown it now. And why didn't I say something before? And she's going to find out I told a white lie. All of the old me. Colander goes on.
Colander on, yeah.
And says, okay, when you're going to have the conversation with Janet then? As a grown-up, you're safe now. Everything's okay, and you have got no idea what's going on in Janet's life. Do not presume. And wish her well, and wish me well. And we go into these chats, and we go into my life and my challenges from a really kind place to myself. And I think there was a part of me, this is so funny. I often think about this as well. I think I used to look at older people, the ones that have sort of got it together and done the work on themselves, who didn't notice microaggressions or changes of faces or the tone of someone talking, all of which sounds like you're sort of a high maintenance drama-y person if you notice. You just notice when you're neurodivergent. You don't want to, you just do.
You can't help but.
You can't help but, you know. And that's sort of traumatic in itself sometimes. But I used to think to myself, oh, they're a bit dozy. They're not noticing this stuff. They're not reacting to this stuff. That's not dozy. That's self-kindness. That's choosing to engage with something that harms you or not harm you. And so for me, self-coaching has really been about putting my colander on my head and thinking, let's look at this in a safe, kind way. And it works. Doesn't matter I can't retain information from books. It doesn't matter that my hem is dropping on my dress when I'm doing a presentation, or that I've got 2 fingers with yucky cappuccino froth on from the interval. I don't care. The point is, I think through coaching, I've realised that I really like myself. There's not a PR campaign for myself that I'm running anymore. Somebody once called me scuffed, like a scuffy shoe.
Oh.
And I thought, yeah, I am scuffed.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of it.
Yeah. And it is what I think draws people to you. You're fascinating. It's a fascination. Here's someone who dares to
I dare
truly.
greatly.
Yeah, you dare greatly. Hello,
I do.
Brennan.
Hi everybody, Robbie here. I'm the creator of The Coach's Journey. If you like what you're hearing on this episode, the chances are you'll love An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel. That's a free ebook available at thecoachesjourney.com. It's the most important piece of content I've ever created for coaches, boiling down everything I've learned from this show, from working with master coaches, and from my own experience into one simple model. The model not only tells you the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, but also shows you how they can form a virtuous circle that keeps your coaching business growing. It's all free, and you can find it at thecoachesjourney.com. And there's a link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
So I'm aware that we are, I think, she says, more than an hour in, I think, to our conversation. And Mel, we've covered a lot. I would like to, as this is the journey of a coach, the coach's journey, maybe at this point, with your permission, go back to 4 years ago. You also have a diagnosis, I think, a little bit later than 4 years ago. So more like 3 years ago.
5 years, yeah.
Oh, 5. Oh, really? Okay. Okay. And you must have done at some point a huge career transition, which will have involved training. So let's dig into for a moment how you became a coach and how then you have continued to update yourself and make sure that you are qualified to coach people with neurodivergent traits or who are neurodivergent.
Okay.
Take us through that journey.
I didn't even know where to go to begin to become a coach. I really didn't. And one thing, when you've got ADHD and you open up Google and get bombarded with lots of things, means that you probably open 92 tabs and don't do anything about it. And so I wanted to be in good hands, really. And, another thing we already spoke about, the sort of phrase ADHD coach, is I wanted to go to a coaching organization that did everything, not just ADHD. I wanted to be surrounded by lots of different brains, lots of different minds, etc. So I went with Ruth Kudzi, ICF coaching. I think I pronounced her surname right. I've forgotten her surname, in all honesty. Look, there's vulnerability. I would never have said in my corporate days I'd forgotten someone's name. I'd have spoken around it, avoided it, and then not been present because I'd have tried to hold the fact that I didn't want to reveal that I didn't know someone's name. That's peace at last. Love it. Anyway.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Yeah. Let's always be open. So I went with ICF, and it was really interesting because we had to practice right from the very beginning coaching other people. that was quite raw, you know, thinking, what am I going to come up with for coaching? What am I going to come up with? And actually, we now know it doesn't have to be anything big or major. You just have to hold space and things might come out of just a very normal chat. I loved it. And then one of the videos that we looked at, I can't remember his name, he's probably in his 60s now with glasses, was all about purpose. And going over the fact that I used to run ad agencies in London, then opened the under fives play barn when I became a single mum, when my daughter was 2, and always talked to people. The thread running through was that I wanted to connect with people, talk to people, etc., etc. And we did this fantastic course. And I remember on the 3rd week, we did a quiz about positive psychology. And we all went quiet and turned our cameras off and we did the quiz. And then about halfway through the quiz, I realised that I was answering the quiz as marked, polished Mel. And I thought, no, this is not how you're going to become a coach. You've got to be you. And I went back and re-answered it all, and I got a completely different result. And when we all came back on the camera, I was in floods of tears. And she said, what just happened then? And I said, I just let go of the mask. She said, in this session, I said, I just decided enough. I'm not pretending anymore. So the coaching went on, and John DeMartini, his stuff, just brilliant, beautiful. So the coaching went on, and we were encouraged to start increasing our hours to find more people. So I always had lots and lots of sort of social media presence from stuff that I'd done. I knew lots of people on LinkedIn, etc., etc. And so I offered £30 for 6 sessions. And I said, I will not coach my direct friends, but if you know anyone else, and it wasn't even about neurodivergence, it was just coaching, holding a space, you know, not specialist. And I must have got 10 clients in a day. And I thought, gosh, this is okay. I thought it'd be much harder than this. And they all really enjoyed it. I just loved it. I got the bug. I thought this is absolutely fantastic. And when the coaching had finished, I'd already done quite a lot of hours and decided that I wanted to specialize. So I didn't go into coaching knowing I wanted to specialize. It just kind of found me in a way. And I absolutely loved it. I noticed, however, that it took me back into the nightmare of having to do admin again.
Oh, I really encourage people to go to YouTube and look at your face. Oh, God, I know that feeling.
You know the feeling.
And I really want to please don't let me forget. I don't want to interrupt your flow. We must go into your skills around marketing and your presence in a moment.
So from an admin point of view, one of the things that the coach trainers were talking about was using Calendly.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused me a little bit of stickiness.
Really?
Why did it cause me a stickiness? Because as an ADHDer, we only have 2 dimensions in time, which is now and not now. And if I used to organise appointments years ago, I would probably agree to them. They wouldn't go in. I'd be running late. I'd forget them, etc. So for me, there was a big flashlight on the, you're going to have to get a little bit better at the time stuff now.
Yeah. And this is so important for coaches who are not neurodivergent, who are coaching people who are.
Yes.
Because that now, I just want to highlight that now and not now is such a valuable piece of information for us to know as coaches.
Yes.
People we're holding a space for.
Yes. And for my clients, if they don't even know that about themselves, or they've always masked and said something like, oh, there was a cow in the road, white lie. You live on your white lies until you own it. They'd arrive and they would feel so guilty about being late. You've lost them for about 20 minutes because they're beating themselves up. That's 20 minutes of beautiful work that could have been done anyway. So my first thing I always say on time is, I don't have a very good relationship with time myself. And when I arrive late to somewhere, I have to be aware that I have to, like a duck, shake it off really quickly. That's why ducks do what they do. They don't sit there thinking, Johnny ate my bread, and the next day, Johnny ate my bread. They've just gone like that. I say to people, I'm sorry that I'm late. Thank you for your patience. And I said, by saying that, it's done. So most clients say that when they arrive, apart from the autistic ones that have been sat in the road for about 15 minutes because they don't want to be late. So it's so interesting how each one's different. But with time, you're better off being vulnerable and saying, as a coach, this is going to be one of my weak spots, and be kind to yourself. Otherwise, you are not going to be present liking yourself wholly because you think you're not very good at it. So for me, Calendly was not something I was going to use, because the idea of people going in and taking time off me, which I've never got enough of, just didn't sit well with me. So another thing that comes up with time and coaching is that it's really important to put in your diary times that you don't want to coach. Not just coaching times, because otherwise, if you love doing what you're doing, you go, oh yeah, I'll fit you in. And then you're running on not enough fuel, or you're not having time to do things that make you sore so you arrive happy. So if you've got the luxury of having clients want to book in lots of different times, please book time out for yourself. Please book time to journal about stuff. Please book time to go and walk and be grateful for the leaves and light and everything. It's really, really been interesting coaching, me looking at my relationship with time. Admin. When you engage with a client.
I'm going to pause you there. Only want to go on to admin and marketing. Let's not forget either. That I'd just like to really hone in a little on that, carving out the time for yourself. In my experience as a coach, when I haven't done that and I have filled every hour, not with coaching work, or all other work and coaching, I don't have the ability, the energy, somehow the flow to be as fully present and hold the space that I would hope to as a coach well enough. And that in turn, I know has had a knock-on effect, because the referrals don't come in as thick and fast. Yeah. Because my coaching is not as present and as, I want to use the word beautiful, but that doesn't quite sound right. But there is a beauty to a space when you are in flow and holding it truly from that lovely intuition that you were speaking of earlier.
Yeah.
We cannot do that. I wanted to really emphasize that. We cannot do that unless we are well ourselves.
Yeah, and I think before I trained to be a coach, I just thought it was going to be paid talking, paid listening, paid talking. It's not. It might bring up a memory that once that session is over, you might need to put your colander on and have a little look at, etc. And I know that if I've had a few in a day, and mum calls for just a really innocent hi, she might get one of those clipped, I'm really tired, I can't talk now, which in itself creates another problem, because you think I've got to go back and apologize or make space for this. So actually, it spills into loads of different areas unless you realize that coaching costs you,
It
time
does.
and energy.
Yes, it does. It's I've heard actually I think it was Robbie again talking about when you have a drink, an alcoholic drink, it's like borrowing energy from the future.
Yes.
And actually with coaching, I need to be aware that I am borrowing energy from the future and putting it all into this beautiful hour with somebody, or hour and 15.
Love that.
And therefore I need that recuperating, restful space afterwards.
Yeah.
And I'm loving this, that you're reminding us as coaches how valuable that is in so many ways, material and all other deep things.
Yeah.
It's so valuable. It
Yeah.
helps us create value in the world. The chanting practice that I do, I've spoken for before on this podcast about it. It's a practice, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, for self and others in equal measure, because otherwise we can't create value.
No.
So this is a lovely example of that.
Yeah. And I often talk about the duck.
Yeah.
In that we need to, perhaps when the client's gone, get present through just shaking. I might just have some really nice shaking and just be grateful for the space, because there's an energy that's been left with you. If you're really good at it, you're feeling what they're feeling, you're holding their hand. There's huge empathy as a neurodivergent, huge empathy.
Huge, yeah.
So, don't be crazy and just think, I'll book them back to back to back. That's ridiculous. You need to have some time to unwind and to come back to being you as well.
Unless you can. And unless you are able to do that more. Katie Harvey comes to mind. She does do, also been a guest on this podcast 3 times, no less. She does do back-to-back calls, hour in on the minute. And she spends that time in the morning to prepare, and she has absolute set-in lunch breaks and breaks in the evening to make sure that she does have the energy to do that, but she's practiced and she can. So it's knowing yourself, isn't it, as a coach, and doing exactly what we advocate as coaches for ourselves, coaching ourselves, as we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a cat on my lap, you might see a tail. And do you know what's really interesting about sort of the energy that it takes? I don't know about you, but I often find that the client that arrives with quite a proud, you're not gonna be able to help me energy. Maybe someone said, why don't you go meet Mel? I think Mel might be able to help you. And they arrive and you think, oh, I'm not sure how this is gonna go. They end up being the best clients, because once they just acquiesce and give you their vulnerability, a bit like I said when I did that quiz, I just thought, this is it, I'm letting go. The best work gets done then.
And what great experience to have that evidence and know that, and then go in with confidence.
Yeah, I think
next time you come across a similar trait.
Yeah.
Mel, we were going to touch on admin, and then also your marketing skills, and if you've got any great tips for listeners.
Admin. What I love about being a coach is all you've really got to do is to sort out appointment times, contracts, and invoice. So I invoice at the end of a discovery call, a block of 6 with my bank details on it and my address should they want to come here. So there's none of that extra texting. I have a template. And the contract gets sent to them. I make sure, because they're neurodivergents, they haven't got to print it off, because our printers have quite an odd life of their own, in my household.
Have a whole other podcast about printers in the world.
The printers.
Anyway, let's not go there because that's boring.
So we just get an approved back. It gets put in an Excel spreadsheet, had approved, and that's the end of it. And then the way that I also converse with clients is through my social media. So I have my social media, and then I have my website as well. And I think it's very, very important in your website to talk about who you are, talk about why you think you can really hold this space for them, what your experience has been. I think some people kind of like just brush over who they are because they think warts and all, it might be terrible. Well, you got to show up as a real person ultimately. In terms of my social media, I follow lots of people. I share lots of other people on my social media. I don't think it's always got to be about me. Otherwise, it puts a real expectation on yourself that you've got to create a polished video twice a week. I mean, if I had £1 for everyone that doesn't do social media because they're not quite sure that it's good enough, let's talk about perfectionism and put your colander hat on then. Because actually, if it's a bit scuffy and unpolished, it sort of shows them that they can be scuffy and unpolished, you know. I think it's...
And you are the example of that we can all look at and
Yeah,
go, oh yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
And it's brave. It can be
It's
very, take a
brave.
lot of courage.
It's brave. And I often film myself maybe walking along, talking about how wonderful life is. But I'm also aware there's lots of chat about toxic positivity, which is a whole interesting chat about the fact that I'm not saying you need to be positive all the time. I'm saying you just need to do the colander work and realize what keeps affecting you being happy all the time, just the self-awareness loop. And then it can be 2 days dwelling on it, 1 day dwelling on it, 1 hour dwelling on it, 2 minutes dwelling on it, etc., etc. So in terms of social media, I might do a video. Make sure when you do videos, make sure when you do posts, here's a really good tip. If you're running Facebook and Instagram, Facebook's a much older audience than Instagram is. So you're likely to pick up a lot more local clients on Facebook. Instagram has a much wider reach. I use something called Business Suite. It's free. And you put one post on there and it goes to both. But the interesting thing about it is you can save your hashtags in there. Because if you put a really lovely polished video on there, unless you're including hashtags in it, the video is only seen by the people who follow you. If you want to fish more, which is your new business strategy, put on there something like hashtag self-esteem or hashtag ADHD UK. If you're in the UK, find hashtags with UK at the end of them. So, because ultimately you're not trying to win awards for your social media, you're trying to create business for yourself, aren't you? Money for yourself. The other thing is, if you ever do an Instagram post, please make sure that you put some sort of writing over the static frame when someone's scrolling. So it's not just a review going like this. And it might say something like, the 5 things I learnt about ADHD that were harming me. People forget to put that on there. And honestly, by all means, if anybody has a question they want to ask, tap me up, send me a DM, because that's my background is marketing. I would always give free advice on that.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and we didn't go into your background really when we were talking about your journey, but obviously you've touched on during the conversation so far that you ran ad agencies, that you were working, you were a corporate girl, really different life to the one you have now, but you have that wealth of experience. So how has that served you now as a coach? What do you draw from that, both helpful and unhelpful, perhaps?
So at the age of 6, if I can take you back a bit, I was watching television once, and in the ad breaks, everybody would go for a wee or make a cup of tea, and I would just come alive. And I would start to notice that people had different accents in advertising, in ads, or sometimes they'd be outside, sometimes they'd be inside. And I started to notice that there were different ways of doing things. And when I realised that advertising was to get you to buy something, because you don't know that at 6, you think it's just a mini cartoon, it started to get me interested in sort of persuasion. Love persuasion. Which is exactly what ad agencies are. We are persuading you. You need something which you didn't even know you needed, a leopard print handbag at the time, you know.
You don't.
You don't. And you really don't. If you do, please go to charity shops. Our town has brilliant ones, by the way. And so what I started to notice in my corporate days was the moment that their eyes changed into, yep, I'm going to work with you, or yep, I'm going to do this. And that knowledge of reading people's faces, I now get it, is the hypervigilance that comes from trying to stay safe when you're in a neurotypical world. So I always noticed that I could see when the penny dropped, because it made me money, made our company money. It was great. And I think that reading people was something that then translated into coaching, actually.
Interesting. Okay. That is not what I thought you were going to say. Fantastic. That's really helpful. And I wonder if listeners can really think about their past lives in different jobs, or even if they're coaching half their time like I am, thinking about what we can draw. It isn't necessarily that kind of material skill. What you've just described, I thought you were going to talk about how you understand how to use social media, or I've seen your article in the local paper or the local small media here. You know, you do cover a lot of ground. The way that you speak about your business, your practice, you know, you really convey that thriving that we're looking for in the coach's journey. But you convey success, reality. You know, so. I thought you were going to touch on those things, but it was something different. So,
but maybe that comes from that sort of thriving, positive, unabashed glee at what I do, joyful counselling. You talked on it earlier, type thing.
Yeah, Jenny Bird. Yes, she talked about cheerful counselling.
Cheerful counselling.
Oh, yes.
Maybe that came from my sort of new business director role, is that you went in and you sold and you persuaded and you watched them buy into you. That loop for me was pure dopamine. ADHD. It was like, God, I got someone to buy into me again. I got someone to buy into me again. So there was always that confidence there that I know that if I get in front of someone, we're all right. There'll be a client, etc., etc. The hard thing is to not let the gremlins stop you from putting yourself out there. Because if you keep thinking, unless my website's perfect, unless I've got the sign online app, you know, you can spend hours and hours not starting your coaching practice. You've just got to start. And if, as I said to you earlier, if you're starting off, do a really meaty, cheapy 6 trial kind of price. Get them in, not just for their benefit, but to build your confidence as well. And to see their eyes saying at the end of the session, wow, that was really, really good. Because it is a bit nervous for lots of people starting off if you've not been in roles where you've had to present and meet strangers. I love meeting strangers. I love it. But I think that coaches would be wise to look back on the jobs they did before, tease out what they really loved about it, really look at those skills that they had, and to revel in them a bit. They've not disappeared just because you're now a coach. You've still got those amazing skills. And that's really, really important. I know lots of coaches who come from marketing backgrounds. There's this way of reading people and matching what they need to what you can offer and help the conversation. It's, you know, it's a really transferable skill. And we've talked about how quite a lot of counsellors might also decide that they want to be coaches as well. And I wonder if that's because as a counsellor, they've sort of had to sit a little bit more quiet and not. I mean, I used to go to counsellors. I didn't know anything about them. Nothing. They were presented as real, perfect, got their life together, and that didn't allow me to be very vulnerable.
They didn't come raw and unpolished and scuffed as the real people in front of you. Oh, there's a lot more that I was hoping to cover, and I am aware of time, so I'm going to jump. I hope that's okay, a little. We've done a little bit of the practical side of stuff. What I'd really like to look at a little bit more is, and it's something I have heard around, that every man, woman and their dog is now ADHD or is having ADHD trait. Everybody, it's the new thing. And I wonder how you address that in your practice. And anything else you'd like to say about that? Because it's that icky stickiness, what were you saying earlier, prickliness, there's something around it, a little bit like with the life coach. There's all these horrible judgments and assumptions, and it's widespread. And that's difficult to navigate. So I'd love to know, how do you navigate that in your practice?
It's hard enough when you come to a coach and you're vulnerable and you open up, let alone having the feeling, if you're not diagnosed, of, or even when you're diagnosed, I've come across people who say, but I don't know what I'm complaining about. Nearly everyone's ADHD. And it makes me so sad. Everybody is not ADHD. 1 in 5 of us are neurodivergent, which is the umbrella of ADHD, autistic, Tourette's, dyslexia, whatever. What's happened and brought it to the forefront is that we can notice stuff about ourselves now that might sort of answer those real puzzling, self-harming questions of, oh, I'm so useless, or I'm lazy. You might not be lazy. You might be completely overwhelmed by the fact that a light was flashing next to you in a restaurant, or that it was freezing cold. That will have zapped your energy. You're not lazy. You're just highly attuned to everything. And an example that I read a few weeks ago, which blew me away, which works on the fact that so we are now more aware of it and can detect it more easily, doesn't mean that more people are ADHD. It's a bit like getting a telescope. So years before the telescope even was invented, were there no stars in the sky then? And then as soon as the telescope was invented, there's stars everywhere. I mean, nobody would dream of saying that. We just found a way of seeing them. So please allow these neurodivergents to actually own what they have without having to persuade or justify their dear ones that actually, there is something about me. I mean, when people say, oh, everyone's got a bit of ADHD or everyone's a bit autistic, well, everybody doesn't have a bit of a limp or everybody doesn't have a dodgy left eye. It's the most insensitive thing to say to people. And I get to the stage where with my clients, they start to think it doesn't really matter what anyone thinks. I've spent my whole life, worrying about what everyone thinks. This is your path. You are allowed to go on this journey. And I think the most interesting thing to say back to someone who challenges you is to not expect that you are overnight a guru in it, because you might not even have the right words to explain your ADHD, but to signpost them to maybe my website or to some really good programs. Chris Packham did a brilliant program called Inside Our Minds on ADHD. Fantastic in that throw more information at them to go and look elsewhere rather than you feeling that you've got to become this guru and answer their questions. And if you don't answer their questions right, then you're not a bona fide ADHDer. What else was your question? Look at that. Oh, the old me would have carried on talking.
Nice. Well, we're relishing the pause because there was a lot said there. And I do just want to jump back into the analogy of the telescope and the stars.
Yes.
That was magic to me. How that opens up the understanding of the fact that it's a way of understanding how we're all very, very, very much human and operate in very, very different ways. And perhaps we did without the telescope. It was easier to run in a neurotypical, although I'm really not sure I'm comfortable with typical, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Neurotypical way, and I'm saying we. I don't necessarily mean me, but people who are neurodivergent are running around trying to fit in and therefore hiding behind the clouds or in the dark or in the sunshine. In fact, as the star analogy would go, there's something in that offers a lot of space.
It's a bit like when people thought the earth was flat, right? And you wouldn't start saying, there's loads of these people around, who are real pains who think that the earth is round. Turned out the earth was round. Got to hold space for everyone to just believe and think what they need to.
And that really occurs to me in there is just this huge amount of respect. I mean, I think anyway, the coaching community already holds a huge amount of respect and humanity and encouragement and belief, in people's ability and the purity of true self. However, that's not the rest of the world that we live in. So how, as coaches in the coaching industry, would you offer us a way to really support, to bring the telescope to as many people's eyes as possible without this kind of blanket, just really easy judgment option of the assumption that, oh, is that tone? I can't even put vocabulary on it, but, oh, blah, 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 blah. If you bring up neurodivergent or ADHD.
I mean, it's a funny name, isn't it? ADHD. Anyway,
Yes.
It's a horrible. It needs a rebrand, but I'm a bit busy for that. But maybe rather than seeing ADHD, rather than using the term ADHD, if you're a coach and you've got a neurodivergent client, don't just package them into their ADHD or autistic or the blend or ADHD. Instead, think of them as humans. What will be behind that label is this: never feeling that they fit in, imposter syndrome, being hypervigilant and reading people's tones and the way they look as being that they're another disappointment all the time. Probably they'll be people pleasers. They'll say yes to things when they have not got one iota of a plan that they're actually going to do that. And half an hour before they're supposed to do it, they're thinking of, oh my God, what lie can I tell? What lie can I tell? So please, rather than saying, oh, you're ADHD and thinking you know what that means, think about you've got a real soul here who really has felt that they have had to fight their whole life to go unnoticed in terms of their scuffiness. Put a human angle on it a little bit more rather than a label. Someone is not going to have all those feelings if they're making up that they're ADHD. They're really hurtful, raw, complicated emotions. Why would someone claim they have them?
That depth of emotion, the raw. I don't have the vocabulary today for this, but this is something I definitely experienced for whatever reason, I don't know. But when you bring that telescope and you start realizing that actually there's an awful lot of people who experience that extreme sensitivity and emotion,
visceral,
hiding
honestly.
in sunlight. I mean, I love this analogy.
Me
of
too.
the stars.
Love it.
And as we speak, the sun is coming out. Hiding amongst the stars, there are many, many, many of us experiencing this depth of emotion. And to have this space, this coaching space, or holding a space somehow, perhaps not even in coaching, perhaps in other places, where we really open up and recognize the humanness in that, the reality of that, the commonness of that. I mean, you said 1 in 5. Is something that I think could be really helpful to us in our lives, in our communities, in our coaching practices.
Yeah. And to think through the telescope, every star isn't different. They One is Jupiter. I don't know anything about stars. One is a hot one. One is a burny one. One is a misty one. One is this watery one. I don't know anything about stars. But the point is, they're just called stars. How much of a missed opportunity is there if you just called them all stars and didn't see them all as individual? It's just like the word star is like ADHD. No, everybody is completely different here. But the theme that we've all got in common, neurodivergence, is shame.
Oh, can we go there? Should we? Okay. How does shame play into your coaching spaces that you hold, that you've witnessed and seen?
I bring this in. This is a Russian doll. I have to use a lot of visual stuff because a lot of people's attention spans are quite short. Not because I'm boring. Mine is short as well because of executive functioning. So shame.
Okay, Mel is opening a Russian doll and bringing out a little tiny Russian doll from inside.
I first discovered how effective Russian dolls were on me when I had EMDR.
Yes. A type of therapy. We'll put a link to that.
Great type of therapy. So, big Russian doll. Here she is, going about her business, highly competent, everything's great. You haven't got ADHD, you've got a big job, your hair always looks nice, you're fine. What happens is, inside the big Russian doll is the little shame doll, which goes everywhere with you, which you mask. But it started off when you noticed that you tried to crack a joke in a playground and no one laughed, and that felt sore. Or you invited somebody somewhere to your house and it was a bit chaotic and you might have farted and then they told everybody else at school. Take that into teenage time. You might have tried to explain something not very well, and so people sort of thought you weren't very intelligent. You might have said no to 2 parties, so no one invites you again. Become an adult. You go for a job interview. You say the wrong thing. You forget what they've said. You then don't get the job. All of that gets condensed into shame. I am not good enough as to who I am. So people arrive like this at mine, but it's covered up.
Like this, Mel is holding the tiny doll of shame inside.
But they arrive really competent, in the big Russian doll. Hello, Mel. Lovely to meet you. Thank you very much for coming. And in about 15 minutes of them seeing my vulnerability, because I might sit on the floor. I don't sit in chairs very often, or I might do a big star stretch in the middle of a pause. And I say, would you like to do one? They say, can I do that here then? I say, yeah, stand up, do a twirl or something, jump up and down a bit. It's fine. Get your energy out, come and sit down again. And so I end up then coaching the tiny Russian doll. And it's so interesting is that by about session 2 or 3, they can say to me, the old me, which you hear that me saying that quite a lot. When we say old me, we mean the one that lives in shame. That's what that means in neurodivergent terms. Okay. They'll say the old me would have agreed to bake a cake for the PTA, but the new me will now say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that. I'm too busy, but feel free to ask me again, and walk away, have a little duck flap in terms of, oh, that was powerful, that was new, but I liked the result, and carry on swimming.
Or bake a cake for the PTA that isn't that good, and that's fine.
Yes, absolutely.
Terrifying. Right, there's something I think you've not mentioned here that I wanted to highlight that might be worth coaches knowing about if they don't already, and that is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is something I have been reading about, and I may have experienced, I think, over my life. And when I listen to stories, I realise how RSD, as many people are now calling it, can play into that shame, because many of the things you've mentioned, I said no to 2 parties and didn't get invited again, for example. For many people, perhaps 4 out of 5, that would not have been compounded into the little doll of shame, the little inside big horrible stone of knowing that you are a awful, horrible, shameful person. It doesn't feed into that. It's perhaps going back to the duck, shaking off. There is water off a duck's back that comes more easily than to people who perhaps are neurodivergent and have that experience of excruciating, pain that you can't grapple with, that just explodes from within you, and you have to mask it while inside your body is squirming with just excruciating. I've heard someone call it squirrels, but just ants and maggots crawling everywhere. And so this is something. Well, maybe talk about RSD. Maybe talk about what you know about RSD, and then how that plays into building shame, and then how that presents itself in your coaching sessions, and how you can. It sounded as if almost you could practice your way out of it with the colander, perhaps.
Yes. So, from about the age of 4 to 5, as a neurodivergent kid, you probably can't sit still. You might ask pretty direct questions. You might say to a teacher challengingly, "That's not right." Or you might be a bit dreamy and be brought back to the class with a tone that's, "Melanie, aren't you concentrating? What's the matter with you?" Or this is a good one. "I suppose you've not brought your homework in." You're already being presented with a framework of people being disappointed with you. And so, as they're the grown-ups and they're the ones that are teaching you about life, that becomes your life. That's what you think, yeah? So from about the age of 4 to 5, we receive probably, from about the age of, from when we start to go to school, we sort of probably receive 4 to 5 negative messages or facial looks per day. It might be this one, head nodding. It might be the tut.
Yeah.
It might be but of course, you know all about that, don't you? That sort of passive-aggressive-y stuff.
Or the sharp intake of sucking air through teeth.
Sucking air. Or, why can't you ever, why do you always spill water down your top when you're drinking? Well, because I'm not very good at coordination. That's the end of that. But I didn't know that then. So therefore, all of these sounds and voices are forever telling you you're not good enough. So what you start to do is you start to look out for the tone and look out for the eye change, or look out for the intake of breath noise or whatever. And you just immediately associate that neural pathway, M25, massive one, with, oh my God, when I see that look, when I hear that tone change, it's all about me not being good enough.
Yeah.
What I do in my coaching is I have a stone, which I've got loads of stones because I live near the beach. This stone is the amygdala, which I bring up when I know the client's talking from their amygdala rather than from themselves. I just lift it up. I don't even say anything, and they say...
And for those listening, this is a stone that is covered in what looks like worms, and it's a fossilized
mess.
Something other. Yeah.
And so I don't even say anything. So I lift it up, and they say, "Oh my God, that's not even me talking, is it? That's my amygdala." I say, "Yep."
Yeah.
I've got another stone which has just got lots of lines down the side here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we are about to go into our rejection sensitive dysphoria moment and worry, the first thing they learn is you've noticed a tone, you've noticed an eye change, it's given you a memory back from when you were little. What might be going on for them? And so I hold up the stone with the lines, and a good example would be someone who's having a particularly bad day. They don't particularly like themselves that day, and they're driving along behind someone who's quite slow and keeps braking all the time. And one of the first things they might do is go into a rage or honk or whatever, because it's always about, why is my life hard? Why isn't anyone making my life easy, etc., etc. And a good way of thinking is, maybe in the passenger seat is their little boy who's holding a glass bowl with a fish in it. And it's his favourite fish. He's had it for 4 years and the fish is ill. And the reason why daddy is driving slowly is he's taking the fish to the vets and he doesn't want to spill the water. And that stops clients in their tracks. So when they go to kind of spiel about, she did this and she this and that hurt, I lift up the amygdala stone. They stop themselves. They put a colander on their head and then they go into lots of different really funny explanations for why that person might have reacted that way, to try and sever this link that you are not responsible for everybody's feelings. And sadly, when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, there were no telescopes to understand neurodiversity. And so we probably were a bit annoying. We probably were a bit distant. We probably were this. But we were still good enough. And I think part of coaching is to allow them to notice how often they go into sort of a self-sabotage mode and how quickly they can get themselves out of it by offering compassion to what might be going on with the other person that they thought was rejecting them.
And a practice of that. And it's a practice. You're talking about the M25, like this, waving your hands around. Like
You've got to make it a tiny lane.
You know, we need to start off with the little path through the woods over there and the grassy meadow. Yeah. And we need to start and practice until it becomes, not that we want more M25s in the world, till it becomes a huge highway.
Yeah.
Motorway.
So when you go to WH Smith's and the lady behind the till is having, we don't even know that, and the lady behind the till is a bit short with you and gives you a bit of, doesn't maybe even look you in the eyes. She might be neurodivergent, doesn't mean she doesn't like you. Is a bit short with you, rather than you reacting because you feel a little bit offended and a bit rejected, immediately smile back to the lady who's short with you, wish her a lovely day and truly mean it. It's probably nothing to do with you. And the RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, has come about from always feeling a misfit and being criticised for who we are.
It's conditional.
It's totally conditional.
As children, because of the way that somebody may have, let's say, may have been behaving, you then have invited the responses, way more responses, criticisms, sharp intakes of breath, rolling eyes, whatever it is, than people who perhaps are more neurotypical, I'm doing with inverted commas.
But the critical...
And that leads me into, because I'm aware of time. No, if
I was just going to say, which leads me into, coaches, have a look at your relationships with your parents. Because probably when you're hanging out with your parents, we've just done the Christmas one, you go back into little child mode. And actually, maybe the reason mum was critical to you a lot, or maybe dad was always highlighting that you needed to work harder, was for their own image and their own insecurities. It's not for you to mend yourself.
Yeah. I'm aware of time. This is my job, isn't it? To take responsibility for the time of this conversation that we're having. And I was about to ask you, I'm going to have to prioritize, because you also mentioned about how your coaching has improved your relationship with your parents, how and why. I'm going to jump from that. But let's be aware that it's a really useful thing for coaches to do, because it talks about whether often it's these, is it fear or is it wisdom speaking? Is it our amygdalas or is it our inner knowing?
Yes.
Our prefrontal cortex. So
transactional analysis, am I going into child?
Yeah. So go look into that. And if you've got anything good on that, Mel, we can put a link in the show notes.
We'll do. Okay.
Direct people to. So I shall put that there. And then I really do think what you've just been speaking about, and we've been speaking about RSD and masking, and as coaches, for us to understand that level of anxiety, one of the questions you said would be good to ask you about was for you to tell us about anxiety in neurodivergence, how we're seen by others growing up, about people pleasing, and how they're all linked together. And I think for me, the level of anxiety that people are able to mask, how do we see through that if we don't necessarily have that experience in our own lives as coaches, to support coachees, I mean?
I love Brené Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if your kind of shell is really, really brittle, what do they say? I've got broad shoulders, I'm thick-skinned, all of that, right?
Yeah.
Is to grow as a coach, it's actually about becoming vulnerable. And I think there's a real fear, particularly when you've come from the corporate world, that being vulnerable means it's all going to unravel. You're not going to be in control of the situation, etc., etc. Try feeling the discomfort of not being in control. It's lovely. It's hard, but that's where, by you as a coach not steering conversations, is going to get the best for the client. They need to take you where they need to go. We're just we're just facilitating a beautiful experience, but the discomfort of not, people pleasing to make somebody like you, or the discomfort of having no boundaries in the hope that they'll pick you as their coach and saying, oh, you can call me whenever. You don't do that. When a client finds a really good coach, they'll probably want to text you every day for more and more and more and more of it. You've got to have boundaries. You're not working as a coach to be liked. If you are, go and do some work on that. Put your colander hat on and say, why do I feel unliked? You're actually, you're actually needing to show them, a bit like you just said, which was beautiful. I'm in charge of the time. I'm responsible for the time. When a client says something like, oh, I should go now because the session's, we've nearly done, I always say to them, I'm in charge of the time. You can just relax. So be careful with overextending, trying to get people to like you, people pleasing, terrible boundaries. All of that is something that through coaching you should probably be able to improve on.
Yeah. And again, that's a lovely full circle, isn't it, into the work that we do on ourselves. And we were talking about authenticity and how authentic and raw and unpolished you have become, and how that served you as a person and you as a coach, and therefore your coachees.
Yeah. Be vulnerable. You've got to be vulnerable as a coach.
Mm. Now, there's an awful lot of information on your website about the practicalities of your coaching practice. There's a lot of things on social media, all of which we'll put in the show notes. So I would like to ask you before we finish, first of all, if there was one thing that you would really hope coaches listening will take away from our conversation together today and use in their practice, what would that be? So I'll ask that first.
Don't strive to be perfect. Your flaws are just beautiful. Don't strive to be perfect. Don't wait until the website's updated. Don't wait until you've created a logo. Start. It's the most wonderful thing. And then by starting, you might find that actually the things you were worrying about aren't important versus what your client's worrying about. It's a real humbler. Try not to be perfect. And even when you've qualified as a coach, and I think Robbie's kind of like collective of group coaching talks and things like that are really, really interesting, because you might get into a groove that you think is the only way to do it. And then you might watch something and think, ooh, that's really interesting. I'm going to use it. You never stop learning. And it's not, what would be the word? It's not strong or what would the word be? There's no weakness to wanting to see other coaches in action, because we pick up things from other people. Whereas, often you might go into a shop. It's a bit random. You go into a shop or you go to a Pilates gym and you say, oh, they've opened one down the road, and they say, oh, have they? And they wouldn't even think about going and looking at it and walking around. Go and learn things from people that do the same thing as you.
Mm. Actually, the most recent episode of the Coach's Journey podcast, we're recording in January 2026, is about why it's so important to have your own coach. But go and listen to that. Thank you. Yes.
Sure.
Just be real, for want of a less cliched set of words. Be real.
Be real.
I love that. Unpolished, scuffed. What a brilliant word. Yeah, just human. The humanity and the humanness that we bring to coaching and how valuable that is. And we have a few more minutes. If I want to just check in with you, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you think might be really valuable to our listeners?
If you want to get a real insight into a client of yours who's neurodivergent, please watch Patience on Channel 4.
Patience on Channel 4. Right, there's another link we'll have.
It's a brilliant drama about a lady who works in the filing department, I don't even think that's the right word, of a crime bureau. And because she spots patterns and reads people so well, she ends up saying to the detectives, can I help you solve these cases? You will get such an insight into having a neurodivergent client if you watch that drama series.
Okay. Wow. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And anything else?
No, but I might need to go for a wee.
Aha, well, this is perfect timing. Okay. Thank you, Mel.
Pleasure.
Oh, we covered a lot of ground.
And if you want to listen to some 3-minute podcasts, they're on my website as well. I know you've listened to them, which was my journey at the start. But I've loved it. And if anyone wants to DM me for anything, I will have boundaries and I will say, yes, I can help, or no, I can't help. Try me.
Wonderful. And we will put all of the links into the show notes. And yes, I can recommend those 3 minutes because they are nice and easy 3-minute listens that give you deep insight into, or give the listener deep insight into the journey of discovering your neurodivergent. So thank you. And thank you for your time and presence.
Pleasure. See you at the end of the drive sometime.
Yeah.
Bye, love.
Bye, Mel.
Take care.
See you.
Hi everybody, Robbie here, creator of The Coach's Journey, and just a couple of quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of this episode. I'm imagining that means you think the work we're doing is important and valuable, and we think so too. And if you love this episode, I want to tell you about something else I think you'll love. That is my free ebook, An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, which you can get at thecoachesjourney.com. It's my attempt to boil everything I've learned from my years supporting coaching and interviewing coaches about their businesses into one simple model containing the fundamentals of any sustainable coaching business. These are the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, and the things that if you don't do them, you can't have a sustainable coaching business. Get it for free at thecoachesjourney.com. Also, you can work with me as a coach. You can find out more about my group coaching for coaches at thecoachesjourney.com, or reach out to me directly via robbieswale.com to speak to me about one-to-one work. Thanks so much to everyone who has supported The Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alan Bedding, Jessica Jem, Christina Matai, and Rachel Crawford for your ongoing support. Thank you too for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on The Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.